Ladies and gentlemen and friends beyond the binary, welcome to The Reactor for today, March 19th, 2021. I'm your host, Tristan. This is Phoebe. And, I guess I should probably start the show with the announcement that I made 2 days ago now. That this is the second last Reactor stream. I had a little bit of a personal board meeting where I had to work out not only how to turn my life into something that's sustainable, but also how to focus on the things that are, best for my business and keeping, more step back videos coming out and growing that, my content. And because of that, Phoebe, we've had to, at the end of March, we're going to be pulling the plug on the Reactor. I'm very sorry. I know that it was a very fun project for a lot of us, and we had some good times, but yeah. I have to try and free as much of my work time as possible, and this was one of the things. But I will still be streaming 2 days a week on Mondays and Tuesdays. I'll still be doing the Monday Discourse with Mia Mulder from 12 till 2. And I'll be doing Step Back Tonight on Tuesday nights from 7 to 9. So yeah. Phoebe keeps trying to chew on my cables. Can you share a link where you can submit videos? Yeah, you just join the Discord. I'll put a link to the Discord. I'll just get on that right now. Okay. So I will put a link in the chat. And there we go. I go by he, him pronouns. You can find my work at stepbackhistory.com or tristanwon'tshutup.com. If you want to support my work, you can go to patreon.com/stepbackhistory. Or if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can put a Twitch Prime subscription on my Twitch channel. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime subscription every month, and I do recommend that you use it because essentially, if you don't use it, then you don't get to keep what's it called? You don't like Amazon just gets to keep your money if you don't use it. So there is that. That's the main thing to talk about. And what else? If you want to check out my latest content, I have a video on COINTELPRO. It's a little getting a little bit older now, so we'll see what happens. But soon, there will be a new video coming out. The idea, I recorded it yesterday, so my hope is to have it finished editing so that patrons will get it on Tuesday, and then as soon as it gets approved by Skillshare and everything, it should be out by next Friday. So expect new Step Back video soon. As for other things I'm working on, I recorded a secret project, which you'll probably be finding out about in maybe the next month or two. And I'm also for the same reason that I'm wrapping up the Reactor, I'm finishing writing scripts for the Cold War. So that I'm almost finished with too. And I have, for my next Tristan Won't Shut Up video, I just decided on the topic of the next one. I've been batting around different ideas, but I think I found the one. Hey, thank you so much, Cuggy, for the $25 super chat. Much appreciated. Holy moly. Big fan, just shouting out and dropping a tip. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. You know, this is how I can keep doing this kind of work as my job. Yeah. So the next Tristan Won't Shut Up video is going to be about what I'm calling the Tucker Carlson left. and discourse around PMCs and such. So, that kind of thing. And if there's anybody who is new to this, if this is your first stream, I'd really highly recommend that you say hello. We have a very active community here, and it'd be great to see some new people joining in the conversation. So, do it up. Phoebe, what are you doing? Okay, she's going back to her cat house over there. All right. Cuggy, you're a pro. Thank you so much. Okay. So I think that's all of my stuff. So since this is the second last Reactor stream, we should probably just get going as soon as possible. So let's get reacting. The first video I got here is on Berman Trek, which, like, we talk a lot about Star Trek in this stream, so I'm not too surprised this will come eventually. This is a great video from Renegade Cut that I have seen multiple times now, and I'm excited to watch with an audience. Because it talks a lot about the weird politics of Star Trek in the 1990s. You'll see. Well, you'll see where this goes.
In 1964, television writer and producer Gene Roddenberry drafted a script for a science fiction series called Star Trek. The series would show a space-age starship exploring the galaxy. It would center around Captain Robert April of the USS Yorktown, which was eventually changed to Captain Christopher Pike of the USS Enterprise. After a second pilot was ordered, this was changed once again to Captain James Kirk of the Enterprise. By 1966, Star Trek had debuted, and the world of sci-fi would be forever changed. Roddenberry, like any producer searching for a long-term project, was looking for a hit, but he also had something else in mind. He was angry about the suffering and injustice he saw in the world around him, and like other great television writers like Rod Serling, he saw the medium as a powerful tool to comment on those injustices, and to expose them. To Roddenberry, television was more than just a way to tell stories. He could comment on the civil rights movement, sometimes indirectly by showing an integrated crew working together with few, if any, references to any tension among them, and sometimes directly and overtly, such as in Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. He could comment on the emerging women's liberation movement by originally having the first officer be a woman, and when that unfortunately had some pushback, he introduced several more women characters on the Enterprise.
That's true. And also, I think interesting thing about this, like, little aspect of the shows. So they're making that change, but also that if you're interested at all, they just started production. CBS just started production on a sort of like prequel show to Star Trek, the original show, that takes place on the ship with Captain Pike, sort of the stuff that was going on before Kirk took over. And the nameless XO of the ship, who was played by Majel Barrett, who would become Majel Barrett Roddenberry because she married Gene Roddenberry, is going to be the XO. So, like, all of this stuff is going to be relevant in an upcoming show, which is supposed to be a sort of like more episodic and lighthearted modern Star Trek show, which I'm pretty excited for.
The battle between what Roddenberry wanted to do and what less progressive voices were afraid to do became part of Star Trek. And many years later, this battle changed. But before that happened, Roddenberry had one more great contribution to Star Trek. Star Trek The Next Generation debuted in
Majel Barrett is not alive. She passed away. And she's not... so they're recasting the role, obviously. But she did pass... she played... In the 1990s, she played Loxana Troy, a sort of like recurring guest character on multiple shows. And then she passed away a number of years ago, but she was also the voice of the computer for a long time.
1987. It starred a new captain, Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, and featured a new Enterprise. It had more women in leading roles, more to say about the modern world, and it was the perfect antidote to the cynical, conservative Ronald Reagan 80s. And then Gene Roddenberry got sick. A lifetime of amphetamines to work through the writing process, a lifetime of recreational drug use and declining health caught up to him. By all accounts, his role on The Next Generation greatly diminished after the end of the first season, and in 1991, the great bird of the galaxy passed away. Roddenberry was not perfect.
So here's the key part. Gene Roddenberry, when he passes away, basically hands this extremely political, extremely progressive TV series and gives it to somebody who has this weird thing where he understands the ideals of the show but doesn't agree with them. Gives them to Rick Berman, who is basically a rich, misogynistic, boomer, white dude who is like tapped into every white suburban panic of the 1990s, who is trying his best to pretend to have the same vision as Gene Roddenberry. And as the 90s moves along, he takes more and more direct control of the TV shows to the point where Voyager's villains are like based on the Crips and the Bloods and stuff like that because he's just afraid of black people existing. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
His detractors will undoubtedly note his alleged affairs, and some of the less progressive ideas for characters that were thankfully scrapped. But whatever else Gene Roddenberry was, he was a true believer. He was a humanist, and he thought humanity had the potential to create a future like the one in Star Trek. When he passed away, someone else had to take over as head of the Next Generation and the Star Trek franchise in general, and that man was Rick Berman. Over the years, Berman became a controversial figure both among the fans and the various cast.
Yeah, the villains of Deep Space, or the villains of Voyager, are like just a whole bunch of reactionary. Here's the major villains of Voyager. He does the Kazon, which is literally just his this rich white man's attempt to look at things like gang violence and try to turn it into an alien race. And it's the most hacky, terrible thing imaginable. Then he does the Vidians, which are a, honestly compelling and cool villain. Their whole thing is that they have a... What's it called? They have a degenerative disease that makes their organs fail. And so their only way to survive is they non-consensually harvest organs from other people, which is a cool, creepy concept, but also is, in a time when we're worried about trying to get more people onto organ donation registry, is not maybe the best, thing to go with. And then later on, when both of those aliens, when they sort of become part of the past, then Star Trek First Contact comes out in 1996, and it's really, really popular, and Rick Berman interprets that as Star Trek just needs Borg all the time. And so Voyager starts getting just shoehorned filled with Borg stories. And then they also just have another one, which is literally just a copied and pasted, they just took the concept of the movie Predator and made them an alien. It's very uninspired. So, yeah. I'm watching through Voyager right now, and we're just getting into season 4 when all the really major changes happen, and it's just, oh man. I'm surprised how much good Star Trek happened under the watch of one of the showrunners who understood this show the least.
And crews of multiple Star Trek series. He was labeled a misogynist by beloved Trek actress Terry Farrell, a raging homophobe by veteran Trek writer David Gerrold, and a lot worse by Garrett Wang. Berman was not a true believer, once telling the LA Times, "I don't believe the 24th century is going to be like Gene Roddenberry believed it to be, that people will be free from poverty and greed, but if you're going to write and produce for Star Trek, you've got to buy into that." Of course, nobody knows what the future will bring, but Berman did not simply disagree with Roddenberry's humanist vision. He enforced it through a series of regressive mandates, refusals of important, conscientious stories, and behavior toward the cast and crew that was, by many accounts, absolutely disgraceful. Before, the battle to have Star Trek be Star Trek was that of two sides. Roddenberry with his writers versus the more cautious conservative network. Now the battle was Rick Berman versus his own writers, his crew, and his cast. While Berman was a producer...
This is why, we're getting into this. This is why the best Star Trek show is the one that Berman didn't like and didn't pay much attention to. And I was reading this article just a few weeks ago that, because what happened was is that this show he's about to talk about, Deep Space Nine, was written at the same time that Voyager was on the air. And at those two times, they like had their writers' rooms, they would be working at the same time in the same buildings. And there's a very strong sense, in retrospect, that the people who were writing Deep Space Nine were having way more fun and were allowed to enjoy their jobs and explore interesting ideas way more than people who were working on Voyager. And like you could see that there was like a distinguished difference between the people who were just miserable going to write for Voyager and the people who fucking loved working at Deep Space Nine. And it comes out in the two shows.
During the time of the creation of new Trek series like the magnificent Deep Space Nine and the...
Oh, you think that the shitty treatment of Harry Kim is that bad? Keep in mind that he only wasn't written off the show in season 3 or 4. They were planning on writing him off the show, but then Garrett Wang got put on the list of like People Magazine's most attractive or most beautiful people, and just because he got on that list, they kept him on the show.
Criminally underrated Voyager, the evidence of his involvement and where his fingerprints are on each series seem to point to Trek flourishing.
Yeah, Pim's right. Like Voyager felt like you can almost see in the episodes whenever they come too close to having a good idea, they run away from it as fast as possible. Like because of like the syndication, so everything had to reset at the end of the episode so that every episode felt like it started in the same place because you never know what order the episodes are going to be in. When it came to Voyager, there were so many episodes where like, man, this episode would be really good if like this led to a change in the status quo or if there was some sort of character growth that came out of this or something. But because they can't have character growth, they can't have new things happen, they have to reset. Like recently we watched what's considered like the best Voyager two-parter, which is The Year of Hell, which ends, spoiler, with Voyager surviving and all the main cast surviving, but like Voyager is just fucked up beyond reasonable. Like it's just absolutely just devastated to the point where it's going to take months to like repair it, and it's going to be like it's going to take forever to fix. And like they spent a whole year where like everyone's gone through this shit. There's like 7 of 9 who's like a new character at that point. Like she gets integrated into the crew and starts to make friends and stuff. And then spoiler, the ending just has like they do like a timey-wimey thing and they reset, and it's like, God damn it. There should have been consequences. This would have been really good. I didn't even realize this before as I was watching. They set up the Year of Hell in the previous season in this sort of like time traveling Kess episode, which I thought was really interesting. And yeah. You're saying the best episodes of Voyager? I think it is definitely in the top 5. I still like Equinox better. I don't know why, but I have a soft spot in my heart for that two-parter. I think it has some cool things to say about, the thing.
And not because of him, but in spite of him. By the early 90s, the franchise had entered the era of Berman Trek. Rick Berman taking over Star Trek was academic. In the eyes of Paramount, there were no other options. In the beginning of The Next Generation, according to Berman himself, there were 2 producers under Roddenberry. Bob Justman, who stayed on for only the first year, and Eddie Milkus, who left due to a disagreement with Roddenberry. Berman was inexperienced at the time, his biggest credit being a producer on a children's show on PBS. Many among the crew found working with him a challenge. Production illustrator Andrew Probert once claimed, "When Rick Berman took over the show halfway through..."
Your Voyager is one of the reasons you're afraid to watch Enterprise. It's not okay. So like kind of returning. See, the thing is and this is where things are tough with Star Trek stuff, is that Trekkies at the time were brutal. They were ruthless monsters. And if a show was bad, it was supposed to be irredeemably bad, and just you hated it with all of your heart. And Voyager and Enterprise both got on that list. Like, they were irredeemably terrible shows that there was no reason to watch. But, like, in retrospect, neither of those shows were as bad as the Trekkies made them out to be. And despite Rick Berman had some, flashes of brilliance in them, Enterprise has some super fucking bad issues. The show is weirdly, awkwardly horny, and at the same time, it gets into, like, Enterprise is the Star Trek, Enterprise is the vessel of which Star Trek interprets 9/11, and Rick Berman being a, like, far-right conservative, bought entirely into, like, the peak craze of the War on Terror in the early years. And I don't know how old you are, Pim, but if you remember those years, like, they do an entire a serialized season arc that is built around like looking the other way, forgiving war crimes, and, like, making all of these sort of things, these sort of, like, statements about the War on Terror and why this is special. And then spend the season after that, sort of when everybody started having a hangover from War Mania in 2002, sort of trying to apologize for it. But if you look at it as sort of like a time capsule of, like, the really fucking weird time of, like, just after 9/11, it's interesting to see. But also, it comes off as Star Trek being almost, like, jingoistic in a way. There is though, like, there are some genuinely good episodes. I really liked, there's an episode called Carbon Creek that I thought was really good. It's an episode where T'Pol, who's a Vulcan who's on the ship, she's telling the story on how a science team of Vulcans crash landed on Earth in the 1950s and had to pretend to, like, get around and, like, do stuff and for a while, which I thought was a really good episode. And there is an episode which I will defend till I die, where Dr. Phlox, who is, like, this Denobulan alien doctor, gets this patient who is part of a race that the Denobulans did a bunch of ethnic cleansing and an attempted genocide of. And so this person refuses to be healed by a Denobulan doctor and is willing to die for that purpose. And it's about, like, how we face history and how, like, long, deeply ingrained hatreds towards people are how they are, and what it does to people, and how you can sort of try and overcome it. And I thought that was a brilliant episode. It's, like, one of my favorite Star Treks. But yeah, it has a lot of faff. It has a lot of fluff. It has a lot of weird episodes where one character's shirt gets torn off, so that they can have a scene where that happens. It's like weirdly horny. It has some weird jingoism. It's a fucked up. It has some fucked up stuff in it too. But it's not. The thing is that it's not as bad as its reputation makes it out to be. And something makes me think that I need to make some Tristan Won't Shut Up videos about some of the worst episodes of Enterprise and some of the best, because Enterprise had some probably one of the most racist or one of the most Islamophobic episodes of TV I've ever seen allowed on television. And then you got Dr. Phlox is a treasure. He normalizes polyamory. Like, he's from a species that practices polyamory, where men and women all get married to multiple people, and it's completely normalized, and they don't understand. like the thing is, like, there's a whole episode about that, where the end of the day, the problem is that the humans are the ones who are standoffish and wrong, and not the Denobulans. The Denobulans are because there's an episode where Dr. Phlox's wife starts hitting on one of the crewmen, and it starts hitting on one of the crewmen, and when like, you know, the doctor's like, oh my god, like my friend's wife's hitting on me, I gotta, like, this is making me freak out. And then the doctor's like, well, you, like, why wouldn't she? She's very attractive. Like, why, like, what's it called? And it's just like, it's really good. I love, it's such like a great thing about, like, the polyamory thing. It's really great. Did you find my wife not attractive, Mr. Tucker? It's so good. Dr. Phlox is one of the, like, the bright spots of that show, and there's some genuinely great stuff. Was there a Muslim character or is Islamophobic through alien tropes? Yeah, there's an episode in season 3 about two, like, factions of aliens fighting each other in that episode. That what they're like, everything about the episode is trying to make a statement about how Muslims are irrational, overly religious monsters, and that all of the destruction that their society is built upon is their own fault, and it has to do with their religion, and it has nothing to do with anything else. It is so fucking stupid. It is one of the most racist television episodes I've ever seen. And then when I did some research into it, I found out that that episode was written by a guy who would then go off to become one of the, like, head producers of 24, which surprises me not at all. Anyone doesn't know, I don't know if 24 is still in the air, but 24 was a action TV show that was almost purpose-built to try and legitimize torture. The entire TV show was built around trying to make the argument that torture is good. So it's a rough thing. But like I said, like, all TV shows are a mixed bag, right? Especially, like, older TV shows in the 90s when they had to make, like, 20 episodes a season or whatever.
Through the first season, every time we showed him a design concept, his constant response was, no, we can't do that because it reminds me of something that I've seen somewhere, or it looks like a shaver, or it looks like something I've seen in a furniture store. The only thing of note that Rick Berman did before Star Trek was a show called The Big Blue Marble, a kids' show. Rick Berman did not, in that time, and as far as I can see from what is being produced, does not understand science fiction. My experience with Rick...
Why do people who write Star Trek keep feeling like they need to make every third captain a square-jawed white man? I think if there's anything I could talk... You're talking about the new show, and about, like, oh, looks like, what's it called? They're trying to break the go broke, go woke, or whatever. I have a feeling that it was... it seems like the Star Trek show that they're making comes more from the fact that Christopher Pike ended up being sort of a breakout character. Like, he was supposed to be this guest cast for season 2 of Discovery, and then when they did that, he like the guy was just so effortlessly good at the role that they decided to make a whole show out of it. That's my read of it, is that what happened in season 2 of Discovery. And so that's why they went with making this show. I don't think it's like, all right, we did too many progressive things, now we got to do a white guy again. I think it just more has to do with that and the concept of trying to remake the sort of Star Trek of the unaired pilot, because Discovery season 2 plays a lot into that. And, like, given that, you know, the new show that they're producing is going to have a let's see, I'm trying to think of all the things. They have a woman as the XO. They've got an Indian woman playing the chief engineer, and yeah, like I don't know. Like, it seems like they're not going to, like, do a bunch of. Plus, also the fact that Christopher Pike is a sort of, like, white male character who doesn't seem to have, like, the sort of white male arrogance, and he's very deferential and respectful of other people and stuff like that, which I think is also a valuable media portrayal. So I don't know. I think that, and also I'm very much looking forward to that new show, because it'll be they say it's going to be more episodic and more lighthearted, and I feel like while I've loved the CBS new Star Trek stuff, I think that it's been very grimdark and very very serious for a Star Trek show, and I would love to have one that's a little bit more playing in the like campy, fun '60s vibe that they can play with. Yeah, I don't know what else they're gonna go. I don't know what else to go with. Especially, I like it a lot more than their like weird Starfleet CIA show that I'm hoping is dead. I'm hoping so much is dead. It seems like it might be in development hell right now, and if that's the case, I'd be so happy because they're making a Starfleet CIA show that looks awful, and I don't want it, and I don't want it to exist. And I think that it sounds like they got that hint, and so maybe the energy that was going to go into Space CIA is going into making this this new show that takes place on the Enterprise before Kirk, which is fun. And also that they're going to have they're going to have Kirk as like a young bisexual ensign, and William Shatner hates it, so I love it. So that's great. All right, let's keep going.
Berman is he does not understand what he's doing. One immediate impact of Roddenberry's declining health and declining influence.
Oh yeah, someone's like, I want more stuff in the Picard era. I do too. Picard season 1 was very interesting, and it set up a lot of cool stuff, and I would love to see them explore that more. There is going to be Picard season 2, and I don't know what they're going to do. Like there's only like rumors of the what's it called? There was rumors of a show that is going to feature Avery Brooks and Captain Sisko, but nothing's official been said about that. There's just people who are talking about being in talks. And there's supposed to be all the stuff with, what's it called? There's supposed to be that Nickelodeon cartoon show that's going to star Kate Mulgrew playing Captain Janeway again, with a bunch of like renegade teens who take over a ship. It sounds like it'll be really fun.
Influence on the next generation was that some modern ideas for the series were halted. During the run of the original series, actor George Takei...
Yes, yeah, Avery Brooks is holding out to get Sherlock Lofton on, and he did that through all of Deep Space Nine too, so... Anyone who doesn't know anything about that, I feel like I have to describe so many things. So... One of the things about Deep Space Nine is that the captain of that show is played by Avery Brooks, who is a drama PhD, uber theater director named Avery Brooks, and through his influence of being like one of the leads on the show and a director of several episodes, is that he got a lot more discussion of. Because he's a black man and talks a lot about the black experience in Deep Space Nine, and like for example, he made despite the fact that like the writers tried to de-emphasize this, he was always one of the big people pushing for more representation of the fact that Sisko's a single father who's raising a teenage son, and like that is like a central part of the Sisko story, which the writers didn't want to put a lot of attention on, but Avery Brooks really, really did, and so he won those fights. And now that they're trying to get him back for the show, he says that he's basically holding out to do such a show unless he can have Sherlock Lofton, who is the guy who played his son in Deep Space Nine, get him back on as well. I hope that the video doesn't take up the whole stream. It's my stream. You can't tell me what to do.
They asked Roddenberry for the inclusion of a gay character. Following the fallout from the interracial kiss, Roddenberry worried that a gay character could spell the end of the series, and he put the idea on the back burner. Star Trek was cancelled shortly thereafter, providing no opportunity to revisit the idea, at least within this series. After a few successful movies with no references to gay characters, Roddenberry finally decided that the world was ready. At a fan convention in 1980...
Yeah, there's like literally 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine that directly speak about anti-black racism in America. It's freaking great.
1986, Roddenberry reportedly said, "We should show gay people on board the Enterprise." This was not only something he said to the fans, he reportedly said the same thing in a staff meeting for The Next Generation. In a 1991 interview with The Humanist, Roddenberry remarked on his evolution on the issue from the 60s to the 80s. "My attitude toward homosexuality has changed. I came to the conclusion that I was wrong. I gave the
Can we
impression
watch
of
some
being
trains
thoughtless
now?
in these areas.
No.
I have, over many years, changed my attitude about gay men and women. Early in the run of The Next Generation, longtime Trek writer David Gerrold wrote a script for an episode called Blood and Fire, an allegory for the HIV crisis of the 80s and 90s. Roddenberry was initially supportive. In fact, according to Gerrold, the crisis was high on the list of topics Roddenberry himself wanted discussed in the series.
You've never watched a single episode of Star Trek? You should. It's good stuff. There's a whole lot of content, and it's a lot better than it looks like from the outside. I did a whole video on Tristan Won't Shut Up about why you should watch Star Trek. If you're at all interested, you should check that video out.
Gerrold explained how the script was eventually rejected. So that the script, somewhere in there I was, you know what, these two characters, they could be boyfriends. There were 2 lines of dialogue. How long have you two been together? And since the academy. That was it. I go off to a Star Trek cruise and come back to find that there has been a cluster. Rick Berman writes that we can't do this episode and how we are on at 4 p.m. in some markets and mommies are going to write letters. We get half the staff saying we shouldn't do it, and the other half, those who could recognize a good story, saying this is a hell of a script. We've got to do this and demonstrate we are the Star Trek that everybody's been waiting for. By that point, Roddenberry's health had deteriorated to the point that his lawyer, Leonard Maeslish, and Rick Berman were running The Next Generation. While Roddenberry was not completely innocent in this, Gerrold has stated that he blames Berman for the demands and for rewrites and eventual rejection of Blood and Fire. According to a separate interview with Salon, Gerrold claimed a large part of the problem was that Gene's health was failing. He didn't have the physical strength he needed, and he was experiencing mental lapses as well. This was not the only time that the subject of
Mommies writing letters can be just fucking awful.
Homosexuality was shot down by the producers of The Next Generation. What could have been the first Star Trek episode to explicitly reference homosexuality, or even just orientation in general, The Outcast, was watered down considerably. The episode, written by accomplished Trek writer Jerry Taylor, told the story of an androgynous species that had only a minority of its people identify as male or female. Commander Riker, played by Jonathan Frakes, becomes romantically involved with a member of the species who identifies strongly as female. Although modern eyes might view this as more akin to an allegory about gender identity, the character's speech at the end clearly identifies this episode as at least intended to be about homosexuality. The episode has problems. For an episode subtextually about being gay, the romance is heterosexual. To his credit, Jonathan Frakes was said to have wanted the alien to be played by a man and not a woman, and that he be allowed to kiss a man on The Next Generation. Also, a line in the script that uses the word orientation was forcibly removed. In the episode The Offspring, Data builds an android daughter called Lal. Data educates her as best he can, but Lal becomes confused when she sees 2 people kissing. In the script, Guinan was supposed to instruct Lal, saying, when a man and a woman are in love, and there would be men and women sitting at tables holding hands. Whoopi Goldberg refused, and said, when 2 people are in love. Cast and crew decided on the set that there should...
Jonathan Frakes just wanted an excuse to be based as fuck, is the thing.
be 2 men or 2 women holding hands as well, but someone called the producers and the idea was shot down hard. Defenders of Berman as showrunner, as well as the other producers, trot out the argument that it was a different time, and that gay characters, or even references to being gay, was forbidden on television even in the early 90s, but that is simply not the case. There was a gay character on The Mary Tyler Moore Show in a 1973 episode called My Brother's Keeper. All in the Family in 1975 introduced not only a gay character, but a recurring gay character in drag. Cheers had an episode sympathetic to homosexuality in 1983. The Golden Girls in the 80s and 90s had multiple episodes with gay characters and references. Rock had a recurring gay character played by none other than Shaft himself, Richard Roundtree. Early 90s sitcoms like Seinfeld, Frasier, and...
Yeah, if anyone doesn't, like, that's the thing. Q has some serious, chaos bisexual energy that was underutilized.
Friends had episodes and characters centered around the topic as well. This is also true of dramas like Dynasty, LA Law, and lots more. While said sitcoms and dramas were not always entirely sensitive, they were still allowed on the air with little to no fuss. There is no
Star Trek The Next Generation was on when I was young enough to be confused and thought that Jonathan Frakes was my dad because they both had the same beard. So, yeah, very tied to my childhood stuff.
Excuse for a series like Star Trek The Next Generation, which had a progressive legacy to uphold, to not even be as modern as the Mary Tyler Moore Show in the 70s. But this was the way of things under showrunner Rick Berman. The buck stopped with him, and so did any reference to being gay. Berman's relationship with the women cast members was, at times, adversarial. In an interview, Denise Crosby, who played Tasha Yar, told Trek Core, "Sure, I thought that would be the last day, and they came down with a cake and, but my favorite thing is when Rick Berman, the producer, came down to the set and the very first thing he did was pull off my communicator from my uniform and say, 'Well, you won't be needing this anymore.' You used to just stick it on with Velcro and it was like some weird symbolic gesture. I don't know if he thought I was going to sell it on eBay or, they all looked the same. It wasn't like mine was any special thing. It was just a very strange thing. I'll never forget that." Berman recently lied about this, claiming that Denise Crosby gave her the badge, and Crosby set him straight on Twitter. Years after Crosby left The Next Generation, she petitioned Berman to return to the series as the daughter of Tasha Yar and Lieutenant Castillo from an alternate timeline. Berman had a different idea, and tweaked it, and had Crosby return as Tasha's daughter, but Castillo was not to be the father. Instead, Berman's vision was that...
there are so many good actors in Star Trek who got really fucked over by Berman. Is this Renegade cut? Yeah.
The daughter, Sela, would be the result of Tasha being captured and effectively forced to become a concubine to a powerful Romulan. So, because of Berman, the legacy of Tasha Yar is, servitude to a Romulan. There is a word for this, but if I say it, this video will get demonetized. So, yeah, gross. Crosby did the episodes, and when she asked to return...
Were you alluding to the episode where Sisko refused to go in the Vegas hologram because he doesn't want to pretend black people were allowed in 1940s casinos? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm referring to. That, by the way, ended up being the casino heist episode of Deep Space Nine, which is possibly up there. What's it called? It's like that and the baseball episode were like two absolutely amazing episodes, and they were like one-off holodeck episodes at the peak of the Dominion War storyline, and they were fucking great.
Berman denied her for unknown reasons. Marina Sirtis, who played Counselor Deanna Troi, noted that negotiating her contract with Rick Berman and Paramount was a nightmare, once stating, "Women are always paid less, and the negotiations are always uglier because there is some kind of feeling that we don't deserve the same money as the boys. It was always ugly. I quit smoking for 6 years, but what got me started again was contract negotiations with Paramount. That is..."
What's this question that you want answered? What are we watching? We're watching Berman Trek. It's a Renegade cut video.
That's how bad it was. It apparently got worse during the Next Generation movies. As she once
baseball
stated,
episode is
"When
fucking
I was negotiating
amazing.
for Nemesis, they literally threatened to fire me."
I would put the baseball episode of Deep Space Nine on my top 5 Star Trek episodes, and it's not even. I'm not even into sports that much. It's such a great episode.
Me and recast Troy. Well, not actually recast, but they said, "We're going to fire you and hire Jerry Ryan." And I said, "Well, Jerry Ryan won't do it for that money, that is for sure." In fact, Ryan refused, and Sirtis was back in. The women of the Next Generation had very little to do in the movies. Guinan is only in Generations and some cameo in Nemesis. Crusher is an afterthought in all 4 movies, and Troy has little to do except in the aforementioned Nemesis, in which,
Yeah, this is the part about someone was saying in the levity is what makes Deep Space Nine so good. It makes the characters whole. It's like, yeah, one of my favorite things about the like episodic 20 episode season 90s Star Trek shows is that you get to do episodes that are purely comedic. You get to do like fun stuff and like random one-offs, and I feel like through those things you get to spend more time feeling comfy and understanding the characters better, which like today when all TV is like hyper serialized and very, very short seasons that have massive budgets, you end up with shows where one storyline happens very fast and then you get no time to just like chill with the characters and stuff, and you don't feel as attached to any individual person like you would from like a 90s show. As for the question about whether teachers and professors are the educational wing of the bourgeois, that's highly, highly, highly reductive. There might be some like, perverse incentives, especially in private schools and in like the neoliberal university. But to say like that teachers are just part of the bourgeois is a little unfair to teachers.
It was a violation.
It wasn't only the women who had run-ins with Berman, though. One actor who left The Next Generation specifically because of the producers, most notably Berman, was Will Wheaton, who played Wesley Crusher. Wheaton was approached to be in a Milos Forman film, Valmont. This was not only a good opportunity for Wheaton, but also for Star Trek The Next Generation. Having one of your actors in an Oscar winner's movie would help build the prestige of the series. Most producers would be happy to work around the actor's schedule because of this, but Rick Berman and Brannon Braga apparently shut it down, allegedly citing Wheaton being critical to an upcoming episode. However, when said episode was shot, Wheaton discovered that it had nothing to do with him, and that in the edit, he was barely in it.
Someone was saying it's only a paper moon. Where does that rank? That's a really good one too. That's where Nog retreats into the holodeck to handle his PTSD. It's another really good episode.
This is why the Wesley Crusher character was written out. Wheaton just couldn't work with Rick Berman as showrunner. Star Trek Deep Space Nine debuted. Much of the show was run by Ira Stephen Bear, once Michael Piller left DS9 after Season 2 to work on Voyager. Bear turned DS9 into something Berman could not understand. A series with consequences. Episodes had consequences for future episodes. New, fresh, exciting ideas could be explored, and by all accounts, Berman hated it. Ronald D. Moore, who wrote episodes for both The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, once remarked upon the contentious relationship between Bear and Berman. They were just always conservative. You were always pulling back from something. You were never given a note saying, go farther, go wilder. This needs to be more shocking. It was always, pull it back, be safer. I remember one particularly insane argument that Ira and Rick had when Nog was injured and ended up losing a leg. There was this ridiculous extended argument that I was in the room while Ira was on the phone. He had written the draft where he had lost both legs, and Rick was just appalled. We can't lose the character's legs. And we were like, no, we've got to. We've got to have somebody who's injured in this war who's not just a guest star in the background. Much of Deep Space Nine revolved around heightened tensions between the Federation and the Dominion over the course.
The episode where Nog loses his leg is fucking, man, it's a dark episode and tragic. The other episode of Deep Space Nine that's really good is, and I think many people would say this, but my favorite episode is, I think it's called In the Pale Moonlight or something like that. In the Pale Light. It's the episode with them getting the Romulans into the Dominion War. It's fucking, it's one of the, In the Pale Moonlight, yeah. It's one of the darkest episodes of Star Trek and probably the best episode of Star Trek. I don't know.
Of seasons 3, 4, and 5, resulting in full-scale war in seasons 6 and 7. If Berman had his way, it never would have happened. Bear didn't convince him. Rather, he had to lie. According to Moore, the only reason the Dominion War even happened was because Bear kept it from Berman until it was too late. Much like with The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine was not permitted to be particularly gay. Elam Garrick, a plain, simple tailor.
Yeah, these two most definitely headcanon fucked for many people, including, I think, the actor who played Garrick.
Who absolutely was not a Cardassian spy, was supposed to be a one-off character. Actor Andrew Robinson brought the character to life, particularly in his scenes with Dr. Julian Bashir, played by Alexander Siddig. The writers loved him and decided...
Have you seen the DS9 documentary, What We Left Behind? Yes. Yes, I have seen it. It's good.
...to keep him around. Sparks flew between Garrick and Bashir. They started having meals together and grew closer and closer. Robinson confessed that this tension and this characterization was intentional on his part. For fans of the pairing, it seemed that this could be building to Star Trek's first gay relationship. Yet, after the excellent episode The Wire aired, the two began to have fewer and fewer scenes together, and Garrick was romantically paired with a young Cardassian woman named Zial. To some viewers, the characters seem to have just drifted apart, but over the years, the cast and crew of the show have pointed the finger at Rick.
Seriously, I don't like it was so this when they did this, it was such a hatchet job. Like, Garrick has no chemistry with Zial at all in the show, and they just cram them together because they're the only two Cardassians on the station.
Berman. Interviews over the years at various conventions have brought to light the fact that Berman instructed Deep Space Nine's writers to stop giving Garrick and Bashir scenes together. Andrew Robinson was reportedly told to tone down his portrayal. Homosexuality and bisexuality in both The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine were relegated to what can only charitably be called an accidental queerness. For example, in the TNG episode The Host, Dr. Beverly Crusher breaks off her relationship with Odan when he changes host bodies to that of a woman. In the DS9 episode Rejoined, Jadzia Dax, played by Terry Farrell, is only attracted to a woman because, back when she had a different male body, she and the woman were married.
Oh yeah, Zial got... they really did not do her well.
Only... It's Star Trek, it's complicated, but the point is her relationship is a matter of...
Especially because Zial is like the story of sort of the children of comfort women from like the dark sort of prologue of the show, and they don't explore any of that at all.
Science fiction consequences that immediately go away at the end of the episode. The only other references to anything not straight is in the Mirror Universe, in which bisexuality is a product of a backwards parallel world. If one were to be forgiving of Rick Berman, he did not have much, if anything, to do with the Mirror Universe episodes. Not all problems with Star Trek from that era can be traced back to him, but his fingerprints on the regressive side of Trek from that time are hard to ignore. Fortunately for Deep Space Nine, Ira Steven Behr had a lot of power and was in charge of the overall flow of the series, but Rick Berman's presence caused a lot of problems, particularly for Terry Farrell. These are Farrell's words from the book The 50-Year Mission, but I have to substitute certain words with synonyms to avoid getting in trouble with YouTube. The problems with my leaving were with Rick Berman. In my opinion, he's just very misogynistic. He'd comment on your bra size not being voluptuous. His secretary had a 36C or something like that, and he would say something about, well, you're just, flat. Look at Christine over there. She has the perfect chest. That's the kind of conversation he would have in front of you. I had to have fittings. I think it was a double D or something. I went to see a woman who fits bras for women who need mastectomies. I had to have that fitting, and then I had to go into his office. Michael Piller didn't care about those things, so he wasn't there when you were having all these crazy fittings with Rick Berman criticizing your hair or how big your chest was or wasn't. That stuff was so intense, especially the first couple of years. Contracts for Deep Space Nine were for 6 seasons, which meant that the main cast had to sign an extension for the 7th and final season. Farrell, whose character...
Yeah, the misogyny of the 90s. Oh boy. He was like the misogynistic villain boss of a 90s TV show. God.
Was very popular among the fans, wanted to negotiate, but Berman was infamous for not taking women seriously during contract negotiations.
It's weird that someone, like a real human being, could be this cartoonishly misogynistic. But then again, like, that's sort of what television was like in the 90s, and this is why we need to change it.
Farrell continued. Basically, he was trying to bully me into saying yes.
Like, I get, like, yeah, they did Dax dirty. It's very true. I agree. Which makes it sad because I also really liked Nicole DeBoer's character. And I liked the stuff they did with Ezri Dax, and I liked the character a lot. I thought she brought some necessary kind of energy change to the show. But either way, like, it would have been great to have Jadzia have a last episode as well, or be around for the whole show.
He was convinced that my cards were going to fold and that I was going to sign up. He had another producer come up to me and say, "If you weren't here, you'd be working at Kmart." I was like, "What the hell are you talking about? I had a career before this. Why the hell would I be working at Kmart? Who are you?" Just to be jerky, he'd call me in my trailer. "Have you been thinking about it yet? Are you going to sign?" Like, right before I had a scene. It was that kind of thing. Rick Berman said I was hardballing him, and I was like, "I'm not. I just want to have a conversation. You're giving me a take-it-or-leave-it offer, and I'm not okay with that." So I finally did have a conversation with him and asked to cut down my number of episodes or just let me out. Reportedly, Ira Steven Behr was kept out of the loop and learned about this after the fact. He believes this is because Berman knew he would have another angry confrontation with him. Whether this constitutes a firing or quitting depends on one's perspective. Nevertheless, Farrell was gone from Deep Space Nine, and Dax was recast? Kind of. It's a Trill thing. Contrary to popular belief, Farrell did not leave Deep Space Nine to be on Becker. She had...
To be honest, if Ezri was just a Trill that was it was like a Trill character added as like a little bit of like part of the regular cast of season 7, it would have been fine, but yeah. Ezri didn't get enough room to grow. Same with Dr. Pulaski. That's true. What's this K's name? This is Phoebe. She is a very regular part of this stream because she basically lives in my office. Hey, Phoebes. Yeah.
Not signed with Becker. She simply was, as she predicted, able to secure another acting job following Deep Space Nine. It's important to note something. Rick Berman's defenders prefer to think of him as someone who is only trying to keep the lights on and Star Trek continuing. No biases, no misogyny, no homophobia. Nothing like that. But stories like his interactions with Terry Farrell and Denise Crosby paint an accurate picture of his motivations and character. By most accounts, Berman despised the style of storytelling in Deep Space Nine. Berman denies this, but it was common wisdom among those who worked with him. Brian Fuller, a Trek writer and producer, claimed in the aforementioned book The 50-Year Mission that Berman's mindset was syndication, and that syndication requires everything to be wrapped up by the end of the episode, which is the antithesis of character building. Berman was more at home with a project he apparently felt closer to, Star Trek Voyager. Berman was not only in charge of Voyager, but was more hands-on with it than with Deep Space Nine, even having a fair amount of the writing and story credits. So when we talk about Jerry Ryan's outfit and some other things, we need to have no delusions about who ultimately signed off on them. There was a lot of financial wrangling about rights and having to pay writers for the rights to characters and stories with Voyager. Ira Steven Behr remarked, "We had done the Maquis on Deep Space Nine because they wanted to set..."
I like how Ira Behr has just gone years now with this like aesthetic of dyeing his beard purple, and no one talks about it. It's fucking it. I hate to use more Zoomer words, but it is based as shit, and yet nobody brings it up. No one's like, "Hey, it's quite the beard."
Set them up for Voyager. We were doing a 2-part episode. Michael Piller wrote part 1 and I wrote part 2. Mike, or maybe it was Mike and Rick, come in and they go, "Look, Voyager is going to be about the Federation and these guys banding together to get home on this ship. We don't want there to be any problems, so we're going to put Jerry Taylor's name, Rick's name, and Mike's name onto the story with you." And it's like, what? You think I'm going to sue you? You think I'm going to try to get money from Voyager because I'm writing this episode? That was lame. I was off about that. To me, that was like, okay, you're basically saying you don't trust me, or...
So the photo was edited. No, that he's gone years with, like, blue beard being his, like, regular aesthetic.
Not that you don't trust me, but that you're putting your names on it for ownership of something that...
It's true. Jerry Ryan being brought into play 7 of 9 was a completely, like, misogynistic, pig-headed part of the whims of Rick Berman, but she was so great to write for, apparently, and Jerry Ryan was just such a good actor that she sort of made the role into one of the better, like, character stories of the show, and it just worked. So much so that they brought her back for Picard.
No one is going to question. It was not a friendly franchise thing to do. There was also a belief that the reason that Robert Duncan McNeil ended up playing Tom Paris instead of his Nicholas Locarno character from The Next Generation was that the show would have to pay royalties to the creator of the character. Paris's backstory about what he did that got him expelled from Starfleet is similar to that of Locarno. Both were involved in pilot errors with fatal results and a cover-up. They are not the same character, but their backstories are so similar that the official reason, that being that Locarno was irredeemable and Paris was not, simply does not add up. Rick Berman was more hands-on with Voyager than with Deep Space Nine, and it showed. According to Garrett Wang, who played Ensign Harry Kim, Berman told the cast that the human characters had to lack emotion. All acting had to be underplayed and militaristic. This was apparently in service of making the alien characters seem more real by contrast. During the first year of shooting, the actors were required to reshoot scenes due to excessive emotion. If you thought some of the characters on Voyager were a little dry, this was apparently by design. Ryan wanted Harry Kim to be promoted from ensign to show character growth, but Rick Berman and Brannon Braga consistently refused this request. Wang also requested to direct an episode, and Berman denied this request as well. Wang was the first cast member in the history of the franchise.
I really don't get this part. Like, I know it, like Berman fucked over Garrett Wang by not letting him, like, get into directing and fucking over his character. I just want to, like, I don't know if they've gotten into, like, what was his beef? What was the beef that they had?
To have a request to direct refused. According to Wang, this was because he said in an interview that the show should take more risks, and Berman held on to this grudge. Wang has said of this, "I was the first actor in Star Trek history to be denied the chance to direct.
The show should take more risks. Oh dear.
The irony of the situation was that, unlike my predecessors, who only wanted to direct for the sake of directing and acquiring their DGA cards, I was the only one who wanted to direct Trek and make it the best it could be, drawing upon my knowledge and experiences as a lifelong fan of science fiction. I truly believe that if I was given the chance, it would have been the best freshman effort by a Trek actor, because of my passion for sci-fi. This missed opportunity has haunted me ever since." Wang was nearly fired from...
I really wish they could get him on to... wish they could get Garrett Wang to direct maybe some episodes of Discovery or something. I feel like it'd be really good.
Voyager at the end of the third season to make room for 7 of 9, but he was kept on, perhaps due to being one of People magazine's 50 most beautiful people. Instead, Jennifer Lin was let go. While Jerry Ryan's skin-tight suit was...
To be fair on that one, apparently Jennifer Lin was difficult to work with, and given that, I think, soon after she left Voyager, she, like, more or less, she did American History X and then kind of left acting and had some, like, severe mental health problems, and, like, only a few years ago got arrested for indecent exposure. Makes me think that she might have been a bit of a mess.
Was designed by Robert Blackman.
They could bring Harry Kim back for Picard.
Rick Berman and Brannon Braga. Ryan herself confirmed that the producers wanted her outfit.
They got the connection. They got Jerry Ryan already.
Cups, and for the outfit to hug the skin. Ryan was forced to wear a painful corset under the catsuit that was so unbearable that she routinely passed out from the pain. Oxygen tanks had to be on standby. In an interview, she once lamented that she wished she could have been given the catsuit after production had wrapped, so that she could personally burn it. Subsequent costumes included this number, which literally underlines her chest for the audience. Star Trek Voyager was yet another Trek incarnation that came and went without a gay character. Kate Mulgrew, who played Captain Catherine Janeway, reportedly asked Rick Berman on multiple occasions for there to be a gay character on Voyager, but I'm
also noticing another thing about this show, and this shot just reminded me of it, is that they did a lot of creative camera work to cover for the fact that Kate Mulgrew is 5'4". So I guess they don't want the captain to be like a super shorty pants, but like Kate Mulgrew is only 5'4", and you can tell they did tons of like setting up of shots to make her not look super short. But then you see scenes like this where it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Kind of like what they do with Tom Cruise, I guess, in movies.
Refused every time. For the most part, Berman was a producer and not a writer. Until Enterprise. His story they don't talk about credits for the other series.
They don't talk about Chakotay. I think there's a Renegade Cut video that's just about Voyager that gets into Chakotay.
These were about like 2 to 5, but Enterprise numbered 37. Berman was concerned about the potential for franchise fatigue, and this may have had something to do with how hands-on he was with it. To his credit, he didn't want the franchise to be ruined, but Berman did not believe in the same correlation of Berman to bad that
let people be short. Yeah, I would for sure. Like what's it called? I would be. It would have been so great for them to just roll with it and have like Captain Janeway just be this like powerful tiny woman who yells at people. It would have been great. It would have been great. Maybe they'll do that more in like whatever that show that they're doing for the cartoon they're doing for Nickelodeon. But yeah.
Others do. So he thought he was helping. He was not. Berman and UPN ramped up the, well, most Berman-y qualities. Enterprise needed an excuse to constantly have the crew showing more skin, particularly to Paul, played by actress Jolene Blalock. So now, after every away mission...
It's another character where they made a Berman-focused, one-dimensional character, and then just Jolene Blalock was just so good at acting that she sort of made the made it work.
Enterprise crew had to rub decontamination.
It's about the shot, not her height. Yeah, I know. They had the exact opposite problem with Jonathan Frakes on TNG. Because, like, Jonathan Frakes, I think, is, like, something like 6'3", 6'4". Like, he's, like, extraordinarily tall. And they had trouble getting shots to work with him because he was just so tall. So if you notice, he sits a lot in the show.
Gel all over themselves. And, of course, if they couldn't reach some places, they would rub gel on each other. We even got to see T'Pol's rear end, but only the top part. Jolene Blalock criticized making T'Pol more risque, stating, "You can't substitute and for good storytelling. You can have both, but you can't substitute one for the other, because the audience is not stupid. You can't just throw in frivolous, uncharacteristic, well, bull."
Yeah, the character design, or the costume design on Enterprise was really good for the, like, trying to be somewhere halfway between a like NASA jumpsuit and a Starfleet uniform. I think they did a pretty good job on that.
And think it's going to help the ratings. In addition to this step backward for Trek, Enterprise underutilized its only 2 minority actors in the main cast. Travis Mayweather and Hoshi Sato were frequently sidelined and ignored during the series. This is particularly true of Mayweather, who barely existed for 4 seasons. Also, again, no gay representation on the series. I know I'm a broken record, but this is a recurring thing, and I can't not talk.
Sitting doesn't really capture the art that is Frakes sailing over chairs. Correct. Oh, man. John, like, what's it called? Riker sitting on chairs is, like, a great meme.
Talk about it. Once more unto the breach, I guess. Dominic Keating, the actor who played Malcolm Reed, clearly tried to make his character gay, but the producers would have...
Here's another interesting thing, if you guys don't know. If anybody here played Diablo 3, I don't know if anybody here has played Diablo 3, But Dominic Keating, who played Reed, Ensign Reed or Lieutenant Reed or whatever, he did the voice of the Templar character that kind of became a meme in the early days of Diablo 3 with like, you are a Templar, Jondar. It's like, I don't know, it's a fun attachment.
None of it. Keating once remarked, I played him so gay. I mean, it was always rumored that Malcolm was gay, wasn't it? It was that one line in his 3-line bio, shy around women, that just shockwaved across the gay community. I don't want to say it was dry and they didn't want to take any risks, but there was an element of that. Producers were rumored to be so concerned about Reed being perceived as gay that they forced references to Reed's unshakable straightness. Again, giving credit where it's due, I recently rewatched Enterprise from front to back, and I have a lot more affection for it now than I did during its initial run. Trip is great, T'Pol is great, Shran is the best, I have faith of the heart. But Enterprise is still the weakest of the 4 Star Trek shows from this era, and a lot of that must be laid at the feet of the showrunner, executive producer, and for some reason writer of a lot of the series, Rick Berman. By Season 4, Berman had largely handed over showrunner duties to Manny Coto, and surprise, surprise, that was easily the best season of Enterprise. The more Berman, the worse it is. So the less Berman, the better it is. Season 4 really was good. Rick Berman held an office at Paramount until December of 2006. Not long after Enterprise was cancelled, Berman stepped aside from the franchise so that someone else could take a crack at it. After 3 reboot movies of varying quality and box office returns, Star Trek was given to Brian Fuller and then to Alex Kurtzman. Star Trek Discovery finally...
I will tolerate no hatred of Star Trek Discovery on this platform.
...fulfilled the promise of a gay main character in Star Trek, with Lieutenant Commander Paul Stamets, Dr. Hugh Culber, and Engineer Jet Reno. I have some issues with the series, but it's pretty good and getting better. Also, Star Trek Picard has premiered. So far, so good. Whether you love the new shows or hate them, it seems clear that Star Trek needed to be in other hands after so long in the grip of Rick Berman. Star Trek is taking risks again, and since risk was part of its foundation, that makes a lot of sense. Here's to the future.
Tig Notaro's Jet Reno is fucking based. Yeah, thing is, I did not know who Tig Notaro was, but I was like, I came to the conclusion that Jet Reno is like the best character on Discovery and very underutilized, and just the sarcastic energy that she puts off on the show is fucking amazing. And yet they never, what's it called? I found out only like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that Tig Notaro's a comedian, a stand-up comedian. And so I gotta check out her stuff. 'Cause like, goddamn, if she brings that like Jet Reno energy to something, that would be really good. All right, I know that was a big one, but that's fine. Whatever. I got senioritis now for for the reactor. What's it called? We talk a lot about Star Trek on this stream, and it was good to do like a big Star Trek video to sort of round it out. I imagine it'll be the last Star Trek thing we talk about on the reactor, but some good shit. Okay, next thing we got here is the antique toaster that's better than yours. Okay, sounds good.
By the time this video is over, you're going to be mad at your toaster. This is a Sunbeam Radiant Control toaster. It's pretty old. One might say, quite old. This particular toaster was most likely made in the early 1960s, but its design goes back at least to 1948. But don't let its age fool you. In most respects,
I love technology
this chrome
connections.
contraption is light years ahead of your toaster. Unless you have one of these in your kitchen.
I also found out in a D&D campaign that I've been running for an entire year almost now, that one of the characters whose name is Tig is based on Tig Carino, and that's like the only note that she started the character with. Didn't know the entire time that not only was this based on an actor, but based on the actor who plays Jet Reno, so...
You've never known true toasting luxury. Let me show you what I mean. To use this modern fancy pants toaster, you must first place your bread into the slots, then firmly press down on this lever. Then you must wait. Once the
last Star Trek... Well, I'll probably still end up talking about Star Trek on the other 2 streams I do, especially the one with Mia. and especially when we get some new Star Trek coming out. But yeah, I mean, we're wrapping up like the reactors. This is the second last episode. I'm kind of cutting back on some stuff to make my work-life balance a little bit more sane and to make more step back videos. But yeah, it was fun.
The timer reaches 0, your toast is thrust upward with passionate fury.
Doesn't mean Mulder hates Star Trek? Oh no, she loves it.
Now to use this practically antique toaster, you begin by inserting your bread slices into the slots and then...
Have I covered Lower Decks yet? Not really, but I really like it.
Did that... The bread. It just went down on its own. What madness is this? Oh, but this is an old-fashioned toaster. It doesn't have that digital display to warn me that the toast is going to pop up. Wait, did it just shut off? What is happening? Now, if you're like me, you're not just flabbergasted by this toaster's effortless, silent, and fluid operation. You're also mad at how clunky and obnoxious this much, much newer toaster is. Let's go for another round of toast. Literally, the only thing you have to do...
Will the reactor ever come back? I mean, I can't say never, but there's definitely no plans on it because I don't... Like, this show... I need to rebalance my time because of all the things that I'm committed to. So, I don't know if there'll ever be room for it because I'm trying to, you know, make my life make sense and not burn out.
Do with this toaster, assuming you've set the darkness where you want it, is place the bread in the slots. It does the rest, and in style. This is how all toasters should work! Before we get too deep into this toaster, you might want to check out a video I quite recently made about the electromagnet in your toaster. There is a beautiful elegance to the way modern toasters operate, and it was in making that video that I was reminded of these 20th century marvels. You'll of course find...
Also, don't forget that on Tristan Won't Shut Up, what's it called? Don't forget on Tristan Won't Shut Up, I'm going to be making some more Star Trek content. Because the Star Trek video I did it did some numbers. Did enough that I can justify doing another one. And I definitely think that I should do an episode on the very racist episode of Enterprise that I can't stop being mad at, so...
Find the link to that video in the description, or you can click the card up above. Let's start with aesthetics. If you don't find this toaster to be downright beautiful, then frankly you don't deserve its operational perfection. The polished chrome is such a beautiful finish, and it's been crafted into a timeless shape. The right-hand toast slot is marked 1 slice, as this slot contains both the actuator lever to start the toast cycle as well as the thermostat. Bakelite handles on either side enable you to move the toaster when it's hot, and the darkness control is hidden under the right-hand handle. On the bottom you'll find the crumb tray as well as the various patents Sunbeam was most proud to be the holder of. Other than that, it's just a pretty toaster. Really, the only
I have
radically
multiple channels set back. I have one, and it is called Tristan Won't Shut Up.
Thing about this is its lack of a lever. But of course, that's what's so neat. So let's take a closer look at the toasting action. Looking down into the slots reveals the fact that the right-hand side contains a lever that the bread falls on. This actuates the switch, which starts...
Yo, I'm like just blown away. I'm always like, I saw this video before, and I'm just like, man, like, look how much, like, first of all, how much more work it took to make appliances function before computers. But 2, like, it's absolutely fascinating just how much engineering and how many different inventions layered on top of each other went together to make this machine. When, like, you know, not historically, not that long ago, to make toast, you just put a like fork and stuck it in the fireplace.
It's the toast cycle. Once it's started, the bread immediately descends into the toaster, and the heating elements begin to glow. Notice how the heating elements are different in the center versus the sides. Both heating element styles are necessary for this toaster to function as intended, but we'll get back to that. Once the toast cycle is complete, you hear a click, the heating elements switch off, and the bread is slowly lifted back up. This toaster is clever in more ways than one. Not only is it automatic beyond belief, it's also using a very crafty thermostat design. Modern toasters operate based on a timer, either using a logic chip or a more rudimentary circuit. Older toasters like this use a bimetallic thermostat to end the toast cycle. But the way Sunbeam has used it here makes for a very consistent toasting experience. If I activate the toaster by pushing the lever down with a high-tech insulated poking device, you'll see the bread lifters fall and the heating elements glow. but the toaster barely runs before shutting off. Why is that? Well, the reason the heating elements are so different on the sides versus the middle is to allow the thermostat to see the bread. The bimetallic strip lives right between these two heating coils, and it's shielded from their heat output by...
Yes, a lot of electrical appliances have been made shittier and of lesser quality tools in recent times. Mostly because in some ways, with especially with computer technology and stuff like that, they can get away with it. But also because it's, you know, these things were very expensive for their time. And we live in an age now where people don't make as much money as they used to. And on top of that, people want the same conveniences that people could get back in like the 50s. So if everybody wants a toaster, and toasters used to be really expensive, and people are comparatively making less money than they did in the 50s, for people to afford toasters, you got to make them cheap. And also, if you make them cheap, that means they break and you have to buy another one, which means they're disposable, and it makes it for more purchasing.
By these little wings. When it's toasting, the bimetallic strip isn't warmed significantly by the heating elements. Instead, it's warmed mainly by the heat radiating from the bread itself. This means that, effectively, it measures the surface temperature of the bread in order to determine how done it is. That's where the toaster gets its name, radiant control. By pointing the thermostat at the bread, it's able to consistently trip at the same relative darkness, pretty much regardless of how hot the toaster itself is. Here, I'll let the patent speak for itself. The principle of operation of the control mechanism is based upon the fact that the surface of a bread slice emits a definite amount of radiant heat per unit area of surface when brought to a preselected temperature, and on the fact that within the limits of permissible error, a preselected temperature at the bread surface will always correspond to a certain brownness thereof. For example, it appears that with bread of normal composition, practically no visible chemical change occurs in the surface of a slice subjected to temperatures below about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. However, as the temperature approaches 500 degrees, chemical changes occur at an increasing rate. Time and the rate of heat input are also factors in the degree of chemical change produced, but
look how complicated this machine is on the inside. Like, it just an absolute, like, the amount of engineering that went into this is absolutely amazing.
Temperature factor has been found to be so critical under the conditions prevailing in an ordinary bread toaster as to make the other two factors of negligible importance. Thus, when the bread surface during the toasting operation reaches a predetermined color, the heat emission therefrom will always be substantially the same, and this radiation or emission may be used for the purpose of actuating a control mechanism. The reason why the toaster barely ran when I started a toast cycle with the pen was that without bread in it, radiation from the center elements can travel straight into the thermostat's eye. It is shielded at the start of a toast cycle by this little plate, which falls as the bread does, but once it's exposed to the heat coming from the middle elements, it will quickly trip and stop the toast cycle. Okay, so we know why the side elements are made from two coils, so the thermostat's eye can sit between them. But why then isn't the center element the same? Why is it made of this thin wire? Well, that wire, believe it or not, is what lowers the bread into the toaster. The entire mechanism is based around the thermal expansion properties of the nichrome wire heating element. To better understand this, we need to take this apart.
So much physics! So much smart physics!
And, through the magic of buying two of them, I have an already taken apart one right here. With the rather ugly innards exposed, one of the first things you'll notice is this wild series of levers and linkages. These two arms form a third-class lever and connect to the bread lifters through a linkage on the right-hand side. The fulcrum of the lever is at the extreme left. When the toaster is engaged, the arms swing downward and thus bring the bread into the toasting position. It's a little hard to see what makes them fall, but watch closely. The force in our third-class lever is applied right here, and due to the nature of third-class levers, the amount of motion imparted by the force is greatly multiplied. However, the strength of the force is greatly reduced. This doesn't much matter though, as we're just lifting a couple slices of bread. The force on our third-class lever is itself derived from the action of this first-class lever, with the fulcrum here in the center, and the input force coming from right here. Now here's where things get pretty clever. Mind-blowingly clever, if I do say so myself. The input side of that...
This is like how rice cookers use like electrical resistance to figure out when they're done, and it's like,
that lever is connected to this crossbar. which is connected via a set screw to the central core of the toaster. It's a little hard to see, and I'd rather not remove it for fear of breaking the toaster, so here's the image from the patent application. The part we want to focus on is here. The nichrome wire is wrapped many times around two vertical structures which are attached to each other via these flexible linkages at the top and bottom. The nichrome wire is wrapped quite tightly, so this entire thing is under tension. The squeezing force causes the two sides to be pulled closer together, which flexes the top and bottom pieces and slightly increases the central core's overall vertical length. This is how the toaster sits in its resting state. When a piece of bread is inserted, the force of the bread falling on the trip lever flexes the bimetallic strip via this linkage and engages the switch contacts. With power flowing through the heating wire, it rapidly heats up, which causes it to expand ever so slightly. Being a wire, the effect is that it becomes slightly longer, which in turn relaxes the squeezing force on the center core and causes it to get just a little bit shorter.
Oh my
That
God.
shortening of the central core structure pulls up on the crossbar at the bottom of the toaster, which causes
How can
this
so
lever
much
to
genius
actuate,
be in one
which
fucking
turn
toaster?
lowers this piece ever so slightly, and thanks to the multiplication of movement in our third-class lever, causes the bread carriage to drop a dramatic amount. Once the thermostat trips and shuts power off to the toaster, the nichrome wire will begin to cool. As it does, it gets slightly shorter, which squeezes the sides of the core together, which pushes on the bottom, which pulls this side of the lever down, which pushes up on the third-class lever, which pushes up on the bread carriage itself, causing it to return to the top. Isn't that just so neat? The design of this toaster used the physical properties of the heating element itself to provide the motive force that makes the toaster automatic beyond belief. Even though the wire relaxes just a teeny tiny bit, the resulting movement is harnessed, amplified, and directed so effectively that it revolutionized the way toasters work. And its almost accidental perfectness just makes the whole thing more awesome. Because the nichrome wire has such a small thermal mass, it almost immediately relaxes when the bread is inserted, quickly dropping the bread into the toasting position. And when the power is switched off, it doesn't take long for it to cool and squeeze in again, pushing the toast back up. It just works! A component that needs to be in the toaster anyway turned out to be the perfect motor for automated bread lifting. While this toaster sure is a pleasure
Just like, it's so many inventions just built on top of each other at the same time.
to use compared to any toaster you can buy in stores today, it does have some design weaknesses. Not many though, and we can fix the worst of them. Let's talk about its circuitry, and
See, like, the thing is, like, it's actually kind of sad how, like, a lot of these really, really fascinating and really well-built designs are now just replaced with, like, a microchip, which, like, I guess is fine, but, like, when are we going to get to the point where we can use integrated circuits and then also use, like, the clever design to make things that are truly amazing? But we're not really in the business of making things better as we are making them cheaper anymore.
you'll see what needs to be addressed. Obviously, the circuitry in here is very simple. In fact, it's almost unfair to call it circuitry. This leaf switch right here is the only component controlling the toaster. When the bread sensing lever is pushed down by, I don't know, bread, this little helper pushes on the bimetallic strip inside the toaster, and once it flexes, it allows these contacts to touch, completing the circuit. The switch latches
If I
in
toasted
place,
better
and
than others, it's because I toasted on the shoulders of giants. Perfect.
what releases it, of course, is the action of the bimetallic strip. As it heats up, it deforms to an increasingly greater extent. Once it's deformed enough, it snaps back into its original position, and the two contacts are pushed apart with a click. The toaster is then shut off, and the bread is returned to the top. The darkness control simply moves a little peg that presses on the bimetallic strip. This increases or decreases the amount of deformation in the strip that is required before it snaps back and breaks the circuit, which in turn changes the temperature at which the contacts will open. Cleverly, the switch actuator can't engage the switch again until the toast is removed, thanks to this little swinging cup thing. Now, if you know much at all about toasters and circuit design, you might guess the literally fatal flaw of this toaster. Unless equipped with a polarized plug, there's a 50-50 chance that all of the heating elements, and indeed the metal bus bars connecting them inside the toaster, are live at mains voltage even when the toaster is off. And, surprise, surprise, this cord ain't polarized. Now you know why you were taught to never stick a knife down a toaster. Frankly, this cord is terrifying on its own given its age and puny plug, so it should be replaced anyway, but if you're going to take that step, you might as well add a ground lead too. This toaster is made entirely of metal, and given that there are wires going all around its insides, it's probably wise.
The electrocution and fire hazard that comes with all 1960s appliances. This is like someone showing me this like 1950s kettle from the UK where you plugged it into the kettle. So the electric cord went into the kettle. And then when the kettle was done boiling water, its like thing to tell you that it was done is that it would eject the cable out of the thing that's still plugged into the wall. And like people died because it ejected this cable and the cable went into the water while someone was like doing dishes and they just like got electrocuted. And it's like, what the fuck?
To add a safety ground. In fact, here's a rather terrifying sight. A wire right next to the metal body with paper insulation. I'm sure that was among the only ways to make such a heat-resistant insulation at the time, but if you needed more reason to give this a ground, there you are. I'll link to a video on my second channel where I replace the cord and walk you through the process, but for now, make sure the hot wire goes to the switch and the neutral wire goes to the lead, snaking its way into the body. Again, I'll cover this in more detail over there. The design weaknesses which we can't easily fix are, in my opinion, rather minor, depending of course on your tastes and priorities. Firstly, the toaster of course lacks a bagel mode, but that doesn't really matter because there is no way you're gonna get a bagel in here anyway. Unlike modern toasters which have movable bread guides, the bread guide in our Sunbeam is a simple arrangement of thin wires. They don't move, and they're kind of close together, so even moderately thick slices of bread maybe aren't gonna fit. I can happily report though that frozen waffles, Pop-Tarts, and toaster strudels all work just fine. Secondly, the toaster doesn't seem to do a great job toasting both sides of the bread with quite the same veracity. It has always come out darker on one side than the other. I don't really mind this, and it's not like it's horrendously uneven, but I figured I'd point it out anyway. What it loses in consistency on the individual slice, however, is largely gained back by its surprisingly effective radiant control thermostat. And lastly, though I alluded to this before, this toaster lacks any sort of thermal barrier between its inner core and its outer surfaces. This thing gets hot. Quite hot. These handles are definitely required to move it if it's been used recently. You might not want to use one of these if you have small children in the house, and whatever you do, don't leave the bread loaf next to the toaster. You don't want to melt the plastic bag onto your beautiful chrome finish. One of the more remarkable things about this toaster design is how reliable and robust it was. Even though this toaster is 50 years old at least, it is still functioning perfectly. The beautiful simplicity in its automated design means that short of the nichrome wire breaking in two, there's not a whole lot that can go wrong. Almost all of these toasters can be fixed with one small adjustment. In fact,
oh god, he has a third one.
This toaster supposedly doesn't work, but we'll attempt to repair it on the second channel video. A link is down below. And now let's talk about how silly it is that no one makes a toaster like this anymore. Hello, toaster manufacturers of the world. How's it going? Have you seen one of these toasters? Like, ever? Because if you have, well, I'm just sort of curious why you've never tried to copy this design. No doubt you can make electromagnet toasters much more cheaply than you could make one of these, but I mean, this is mostly just stamped sheet metal. Maybe the cost of these levers and bearings is far greater than I think it is, but I bet you could get people paying at least $60 for one of these new. And you could add so many of the features that people want these days, so easily. Bagel mode? Just run the center core. Wider bread? Adapt one of those squeezy things into this toaster. I'm sure it could be done. You could make the design safer and up to modern standards. In fact, you could improve on the design in so many ways that it sort of baffles me that you haven't. I suppose we've all just gotten used to pressing a
There's no such thing as capitalist innovation. They take passionate work from actual academics and claim that capitalism did it, even though it was usually government grants. And then when it comes to actually innovating, it's very rare. They add a few bells and whistles, but nothing really actually gets better. And the more capitalist we get, the less we actually innovate.
Lever and waiting for the toast to pop. But I mean, I'm getting used to this now because this is just so much better. This really is how all toasters should work. Sunbeam continued to make these toasters in some form all the way until 1997. Why they were discontinued? I'll never know, but I imagine they were just much more expensive than the competition, and people didn't really appreciate the design. But I'd like to go back in time and make people appreciate it a little more, because in my opinion, it's a damn shame this design has been lost to time. I sincerely do believe that this is how all toasters should work. Before I go, I'd like to give a shout out to Craig Reardon, who maintains the site automaticbeyondbelief.org. His fan site, if you will, about these toasters is a neat little tribute, and it helped me get this exact toaster.
Damn. All right. I want to move on to, this is a video about Theranos. I've been curious about this. So let's learn about Theranos.
Do you know the company Theranos? I feel like more people should know about them. I've seen a lot of suggestions from people saying I should talk about them, but I haven't heard too much outside of that without seeking it out. Not as much as I would expect anyway, which makes me think that it's not reaching a lot of people, but the people that it does reach, it tends to have an impact. It did for me anyway. I don't often use this word unless the situation really calls for it, but
I enjoyed it.
This is ridiculous. They were this 11-year-old technology company out of Silicon Valley, valued at about $9 billion. The reasoning behind the valuation was that Theranos had created this piece of medical technology that was going to revolutionize parts of the industry. It was this seemingly magic little
Theranos is the scammity scam lady, right? Yep.
box where you put in a single drop of blood and it'll quickly test it for cancer, diabetes, and about 200 other common illnesses. No need to take that large vial of blood, send it into the lab, wait to get the results, and it was all contained in this cool looking portable box. They called it the Edison, and just imagine the practical uses for it. Ambulances, military use. This box would make it possible for you to go to your local Walgreens, give them a single drop of blood, and then have them deliver you the same day test results. I'm sure that sounds like a dream to anyone who routinely gets their blood tested, and that's what was starting to happen. They teamed up with Walgreens to have these Theranos testing centers in their stores. At one point, there were dozens of these centers all around Arizona. Here comes the ridiculous part. That was all in 2014, and in October of 2015, it came out that the entire company was a complete sham. Those Edison boxes and the technology behind them that was responsible for the $9 billion valuation were pretty much nonsense. They simply didn't work. I know, it sounds unreal, like it's the plot of a poorly written movie, so I'd like to talk about how they pulled it off. Just how are
That's
they
some
able
Star
to make
Trek
this
tech,
happen?
which
The
means
first
it's a
way
prop
is
with
a
some
little
LEDs to make it look like
I'd
it's
argue
doing
that
something,
it's
yeah.
the most important single factor. Elizabeth Holmes. She may be one of the most ambitious people that the world has ever seen, meaning having or showing a strong desire and determination to succeed. She was the one who started the company in 2003 when she was 19 years old, and in 2014, she still owned half of it. The fact that she owned one half of a $9 billion company meant she herself was a billionaire.
I think she's like in
fact,
prison now,
She was
isn't
the
she?
world's youngest female billionaire. Going all the way back to grade school, she would talk about becoming a billionaire one day. In high school, she got straight A's all the time. She had this small coding-related business. She was even learning Mandarin. For college, she went to Stanford to major in chemical engineering before dropping out to start this company. Not surprisingly, Steve Jobs was the person she most looked up to, another person with a tremendous work ethic. She was recruiting key people from Apple to work at Theranos early on, and even went as far as to wear the signature black turtleneck. Can we agree that this was an ambitious person? I think of the phrase, "you can do anything you set your mind to," because if you ever had any doubt about it, here's the ultimate example. She literally made billions of dollars from a box that didn't work. To go along with the ambition, there was also a tremendous amount of lying. Quite honestly, this whole subject just makes me a little angry. The idea of lying to people to advance yourself and your own interest to a point where you're actually harming others. Remember, the promise was one drop of blood can deliver timely, on-site results for a variety of illnesses. That's how it was advertised, and really, that was the idea behind the whole company. Well, here's the reality, and again, I want to point out how ridiculous this is. When a patient would take the test at Walgreens, most of the time they were simply performing a traditional blood test. Instead of taking the drop of blood, they would take the whole vial. Instead of doing it in the store, they would send it to the lab. Instead of using their Edison box, they would use other equipment that they simply bought from a different company. Meaning the entire process was identical to your typical blood test, and in the end, Theranos wasn't doing anything unique. Everyone that they did business with was under the impression that they were doing something unique. They had to be very selective when finding investors, because anyone who demanded to see it in action or the science behind it, well, obviously that wasn't going to happen, but they were very sneaky about it.
Yeah, she intentionally spoke with a deeper voice to be taken more seriously, which, like, is a thing when it comes to, like, psychology, and about one of the things about, like, you know, the subtle misogyny that keeps women out of the workplace or out of, like, positions of power. And so she tried to overcome that by just speaking with a deep voice, and it sounds very strange, though.
They would say, no, it's a trade secret. We can't reveal that. And the investor would just say, oh, that's fair enough. They built up to some pretty big investors, too. Rupert Murdoch, Walmart, Walgreens, obviously, were all investing millions of dollars with them. Now, the majority of the time, they wouldn't use the Edison at all, but sometimes they did, and that's where things got really dangerous. It was not uncommon for a test to come back with false results, pretty much because they weren't capable of being accurate. Just think about that. The customer has no real reason to think otherwise. They took the test at their local Walgreens, and now they're looking into medical treatments, medications, lifestyle changes for something that they don't even have. They were messing with people's health, and I don't even know what to say. Let's move on to the next reason. It goes along with the lies, but you have to admit, this was a great story. If it were true, of course. As it stands, it's a terrible story, and I think that's why the public was willing to put aside their doubts. A 19-year-old college dropout creates a multi-billion-dollar company that changes the medical industry for the better. Now there's the inspirational, feel-good story that we all want to hear. The next one is compartmentalizing. That's a long word. That means Elizabeth and the leadership of the company were sure to keep the employees focused on their own separate things. That way they wouldn't figure it all out. It's like one of those paintings where it just looks like dots when you stand close, but as you back up, you start to see the whole picture. Each department was working on their own little section of the dots, without knowing how they really tied together into the big picture, because if they had stepped back and looked at it, they would have learned that the picture was not coming together. They would even block off certain parts of the lab and lay everything out in a way that made it hard to converse. Pretty manipulative stuff. There was bullying. Let's be realistic here. People who worked there were starting to figure it out, and Theranos was doing really well at keeping them quiet. They would have them sign non-disclosure agreements, because remember, their technology was a trade secret after all. So those agreements made people afraid to come forward with anything, or if someone did start asking too many questions, they would be threatened with lawsuits. They would essentially bully everyone into staying quiet and out of their business. That's not a full list of how they did it, obviously, but there you have some pretty effective ways of how to build a multi-billion-dollar company without actually having any value. Not that I recommend anyone does it. In 2015, everything was exposed and it all started crumbling down. The man that we have to thank here is Tyler Schultz. He was the Theranos employee, brave enough to stand up to the threats and come forward to a Wall Street Journal reporter about everything that was happening. The article about it was published in October of 2015, and that was the beginning of the end. Walgreens cut their ties with them soon after. The company lost most of its value, as did Elizabeth Holmes. The SEC started a fraud investigation that was settled with a $500,000 fine, which could have been much worse. As of 2018, Theranos no longer exists. Elizabeth Holmes basically maintains that she never did anything wrong. She didn't know that this deception was happening, but it really looks like she did. Almost anyone involved in the situation will tell you that she knew, and I think common sense can almost tell you.
Where are
that.
these photos coming
Founder
from?
and the CEO of Theranos, so what else are we supposed to think? There is a criminal trial set to start in July of 2021, and I am very curious to see how it goes. The charges are wire fraud, which is defined as a crime in which a person concocts a scheme to defraud or obtain money based on false representation or promises. You also have to do it using electronic communications, but this does sound like something that she may have committed. A few other things about this scandal that I found important or interesting. Sunny Balwani is worth mentioning because because he's possibly the second most involved behind only Elizabeth Holmes. He became part of the company around 2009 when he provided a multi-million-dollar loan and then ended up becoming president of Theranos despite not knowing anything about the industry. It's all very odd. He's also going to be part of that trial with the wire fraud charges, and to add to that, he was also confirmed to be romantically involved with Elizabeth Holmes going back to 2003. So there's a whole situation that I don't want.
The riches to riches with prison uniform to riches story that's gotta be the most American like story there is, right?
Want to dive deeper into. And then, this is odd, Elizabeth Holmes is known to speak with a very uniquely deep voice that many people around her have accused of being fake.
Every person should have the ability to get that type of test, because
I don't exactly understand her motivation behind it. I suppose it may make her more charismatic or likable somehow. Memorable, maybe? I don't know. But I feel maybe we could add this to the list of lies. And then we have this. Tyler Schultz, the whistleblower who blew the lid off the whole thing. He was the grandson of George Schultz, who was on the board of directors and happened to be the U.S. Secretary of State during the Reagan administration. And there's more family involvement. Not to read too much into this, but Elizabeth Holmes is the daughter of a former vice president from Enron.
Oh, that's a red flag.
More publicized scandal. When looking at this, I think some of the lessons here are obvious. Business ethics, overall honesty. I mean,
destroy rich people. Rich people are bad. That's the lesson.
As people, we have to be able to have some trust in the world around us. And I take a less obvious lesson from this in earning something.
Capitalism is
Being
bad.
honest with yourself. Would you be happy with that level of success, knowing what you did to get there, the lack of morals and respect for just about everyone around you, putting them in financial or even in some cases physical harm? All I'm trying to say is maybe the journey is more important than the destination, and how you get something is more important than what you have. It's all stuff we already know, but maybe sometimes hearing something like this can help you appreciate the value behind it. Well, alright, moving on from that, that was my overview, but this is a deep topic. If you want to learn more about it, I recommend this book called Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup. The author of it is actually the reporter from the Wall Street Journal that communicated with Tyler Schultz, the whistleblower, and essentially broke the story. If you're not a reader,
There you go. Okay. Next we've got Primitive Technology, New Starting Area from Scratch. So this is from a guy, I think he lives in Australia, who essentially does, is just like doing like Stone Age technology stuff on a camping site in like the middle of nowhere. I've seen a few of these videos. I watched them more like a long time ago, but they're really good, so this will be fun. Very relaxing, very zen. One of the captions he describes what he's doing. Alright, I put it on. Palm fiber. I already feel like I'm relaxing. can you imagine though, like life like this? Like, I mean, no antibiotics, but life seems a lot more chill. I'm realizing that tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of the release of Animal Crossing, and it's just like, man, life was just. You just like this is why I like playing Valheim lately. You just build shit, and it's just nice and relaxing. Like, I just want to build huts and vibe, you know? Yeah, I know, because tomorrow is Kelly's birthday, and also Kelly's birthday was the day that she got Animal Crossing, because that was the day Animal Crossing came out, so. This is porn for Anprims? Maybe. I know that I have, like, while I'm not an Anprim, I have Anprim sympathies, and so maybe I'm just like, I just wanna vibe and make thatch huts. It is easier to build stuff in games, yeah. But like, in some ways, the exercise would be nice. Blow up only half the technology, yeah. I wish that we could have the technology that we have, but also realize that it's not all like 100% necessary all the time, and that we should try to, while having like the technology to save our lives and make our lives happy and healthy and everything, to maybe try to do away with the technology that's making our lives more chaotic and unhappy, and try to move to a more simpler existence. Hope that makes sense. Like, just more technology isn't necessarily more good. Be Amish. Honestly, like, if we had more of like a approach technology like Amish people, like the idea that Amish people have where they intentionally choose what technology they add to their culture. Like, it's not that they reject technology out of hand, it's just that they intentionally choose what technology they're going to add to their community. And it's like, oh, well, maybe we should think about that a little bit. Doesn't think medicine made a difference if you take superbugs existing into account. Oh yeah, fuck. I mean, Jordan Peterson's been getting weirder and weirder over time, and he was pretty weird to begin with. He has so many, like, science bros who like his stuff, though. I wonder how that's going to catch on. But I think he's lost most of his, like, you know, fan base. Man, what a skill. I wish I could do this. Making fire? Oh. Peterson said that that scientific medicine on the whole does more harm than good, basically. I have a fire pit now in my backyard, and I'm so excited to try that out and actually like do some stuff with it. I'm so pumped to to have campfires in the backyard in the summertime. Is there a way to make that happen without forcing it on people? I don't know. I don't have an answer. What are my thoughts on Stellaris Nemesis? I don't know too much about it. I haven't played it. I don't think it's out yet, but it seems it could be fun. You know, there is something to be said about how under an anarchist, like what's it called? Our societies became more hierarchical and less egalitarian, almost perfectly timed to our development of agriculture. Not saying that we should do away with these things. It's kind of like the genie's out of the bottle at this point, but we should sort of like, you know, have a materialist analysis about inequality and hierarchy as it is linked to technological development and the transition of the calories we spend in our daily life moving from survival to whatever. Are you surprised you have issues with the Amish? No, you generally hate religious people, so you fit on either way. I would die in an Amprim society too. I don't know half of this shit, but I'm not saying we need to live Amprim lives. I'm saying we should maybe have like a more try to transition to a more simple lifestyle, just because it'd be healthier for us and you know, more stable for us as like people. Oh. Man, that was very zen. I actually feel like my stress level went down watching that. Big Bird's a cassowary. Yeah. Fucking Australia, man. Everything will kill you. All right, so I don't have enough time to do another videos. But yeah. So I'll be back on Monday with Mia, hopefully, to do that stuff. And then Tuesday. But then after that, Friday will be the last Reactor stream. I you know, we'll see what we do, and then you know, we'll keep going. We'll have some more videos, but yeah. If you look at the height data, early agriculturists eat less than hunter-gatherers. It's true. You can find out when the agricultural revolution happens, when people start becoming stunted and their teeth start rotting. That's how you can tell in the skeletal record when people start moving into agriculture. But like, there's no way to go back. And whether or not that's even desirable is, you know, not really a thing. I would love if we could have the sort of the value that comes out of having a simple life that, you know, is a physically demanding enough that you get exercise without having to like intentionally go to do exercise time, and is generally like, you know, closer to nature, but also has the conveniences and, you know, the things that we have to make people's lives longer, healthier, and happier. So I wish that we, you know, could put those things, if we could find some way to balance all of those things, it'd be nice. So I don't think that makes me quite an Amprim. Anyways, why don't we raid the Possum Queen? Solar Punk. Yeah, Solar Punk. That sounds like a thing I could be. Now that's Solar Punk. Anyways, yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Be good. Enjoy the first day of spring tomorrow. And, yeah, take care.